Good afternoon. It's about 2:15, so we will get started. My name is Dan Lips. I'm a senior fellow with FREOPP. Thank you all for joining us for this panel. We've been under strict rules at FREOPP for this conference to not introduce our esteemed panelists, but direct you to the materials that you received at the conference to learn about their backgrounds. But I'll start off what should be a really interesting conversation with a few framing thoughts. It's been 2 years since ChatGPT debuted, and I think it's fair to say that no issue has captured the imagination of policymakers in Washington than artificial intelligence and its implications for a variety of areas of public policy and national issues of national concern. I think there have been many panels like this focusing on artificial intelligence over the past 2 years. But a lot of the framing of those panels are around other issues, around questions of geopolitics and the race between the United States and other international rivals to dominate so-called the AI space. There have been lots of discussions around ethics and the implications of AI for risks of discrimination and so forth. And there's been a real big debate around the issues of AI safety and AI accelerationism, and this view of, is this promising area of technology pose a catastrophic risk to American society, or is it the cure to many of the challenges that we've faced in terms of American dynamism? This afternoon, those are all really important questions and important issues to be talking about. But this afternoon, we have a really different framing. And if you've participated in the earlier sessions of the conference, FREOPP has this unique mission of thinking about public policy and the implications for those living below median income and wealth. And our panel today will be talking about AI and the implications for equal opportunity. So to kick us off, I'd like to ask each of our panelists how they think about the question that we framed for the panel in those regards.
Thank you, Dan. I'm Wayne Brough with the R Street Institute. And if you look at AI, I see this as having a tremendous benefit in terms of looking at equal opportunity. Basically, if you think of AI, it's expanding access to information and lowering the price of information. And in any society, in any time in history, that's always been a good thing from the printing press on. And I think we're still struggling with some of the implications of that. But I think seeing that information get out there to a broader audience, and one of the beauties of AI is it's making it less complicated to use and apply this information. We all talk, I think ChatGPT sort of woke a lot of people up with respect to the benefits of AI. But I see this going beyond just the large language models. Where we're going to really see the benefit are in small applications, industry by industry, sector by sector. And it's going to affect everything from access to job training, healthcare. All of these things that are important for all aspects of society are going to get cheaper and much more easy for anybody to access. So I see this as a potential huge benefit for all aspects of society. And moving forward, I think we just have to be careful about how we consider the broader picture, and I guess we'll get into that a little bit later, of what guardrails do we put on AI and where do we see the future of it?
So everything that he said, and this is what I'm going to add to that, which is I approach this mainly from a workforce development, job training perspective. And we have a very particular problem in our workforce these days, which is a whole domain of skills that have nothing to do with technical training. You talk to employers about what's missing in our workforce, and they will tell you that it's something called soft skills or non-cognitive skills. And this is, they are important for two reasons. One is that they make it a lot easier to actually do the work that you've been hired to do, if you've got good capacity in terms of relating to people on the job. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, though, that it's really integral to learning itself. And that's for the purposes of this discussion, I think that that's the most important factor, is that AI is going to create opportunities for people to gain certain kinds of skills, these non-cognitive or soft skills, that they've never had an opportunity to they've never had the opportunity to do in the past or in their past. It's been probably the most counterintuitive thing that I have discovered since I have gotten into this issue, which is these algorithms can be built in such a way that they become personal coaches. And it isn't just coaching in the sense of customer service operator who is taking calls and trying to solve individual problems with a product. It's helping them to learn the socio-emotional language that is required to interact effectively with other people. And many of you have probably read Eric Brynjolfsson's study from the Stanford Digital Economy Lab, where we saw these massive increases in productivity among workers who were equipped with, lower skilled workers who were equipped with one of these chatbots to assist them in both dimensions, in both the technical answer to whatever the problem is and the emotional content of the call that they were receiving. Among the lowest skilled cohort of the people in that study, they saw a 34% increase in their personal productivity. On average, it was 14%, but for the lowest skilled workers, it was 34%. So there's a tremendous opportunity, we can already see it, to level up the workforce and give people the opportunity to access skills, variety of skills, both technical and non-technical, that can make them better, more productive workers. So I think it's an unqualified yes. It's going to really support people in closing the gaps between them and themselves and the economy.
Thanks. I'm Neil Chilson. I'm the head of AI policy at the Abundance Institute, and I have a background in computer science as well as in law. And so I'm very excited about this technology, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to focus on how it affects people in the bottom half of the economy. And so when I think about AI, the first thing I think is that when people say AI, that's too broad. That's an enormous category. And so any analysis about how it affects the economy is going to be extremely vague at the level of talking about AI. Not only is the definition, there is no scientific definition of AI, there's no agreed upon definition. The most popular textbook in computer science school actually has 4 categories of definitions. And so there is no agreed upon definition of artificial intelligence. So it's a broad category, but intelligence is a general purpose technology. And so it will affect every single sector, but the effects will be very different depending on the sector. How much does it rely on the types of things that LLMs or these deep learning algorithms are good at? How much does it not rely on that? And while ChatGPT is like the most visible example of the sort of breakthrough technology right now, deep learning has extremely wide applications that are especially I'm excited about, for example, in the medical space, the ability to document and identify, tumors on biomedical scans much faster and with greater accuracy, I think, than even trained doctors can, because the model has seen many, many more examples of good and bad, lungs, for example. And so that's my big caveat. But I do agree in broad strokes, just from the history of technology, is that we see rising levels of wealth across all sectors of the economy from technology. And digital technology has been quite good at that. In fact, so in the medium and long term, it always levels up people. In the near term, it can be uneven in how it levels up. But digital technology in particular has a very much a flattening effect. Often people joke that the same iPhone that a Saudi prince has is the iPhone that your average 14-year-old has. So So technology can really have a leveling effect. And in particular, I think that the power of these large language models to engage with people through conversation, which is a interface that everybody has. Almost everybody can communicate through language. That is a major part of being human. And so being able to tap into what I like to call the average of the internet, because that's how I like to think of what LLMs capture. The average knowledge on a topic that's on the internet is actually a huge boost, because the average, conversation about, physics on the internet is quite a lot higher than my average knowledge of physics. And so I think that even for the highest skilled people, there are people, we're not high skilled in everything. It will bring up the averages in those areas. But I think especially for people who are working in jobs where they need to interact through language, there's just really obvious benefits very quickly. I will say that there is some interesting research around the higher end that suggests that there is a sort of flip side. In material science, there's a good paper on a material science lab, which showed that people with the most knowledge actually gained the most from using these particular, from using a very narrow specialized model that was looking at material science problems, because they had the ability to, the LLM was generating a bunch of ideas for research, and they had the experience to distinguish the good ones from the bad. So I do think that, again, the effect will be uneven, especially in the short term. But in the long term, I think it's pretty obvious that these are really powerful tools that give a broad interface to a wide range of knowledge, to a bunch of people who otherwise would not have access to that knowledge, and now have it in an interface where they can literally sometimes type, but literally talk in many cases to the average of the internet and learn quite a lot. So I'm very excited about its leveling potential.
It's great to hear the optimistic take on the big picture question that we raised this afternoon. To play devil's advocate, what do you guys think about the concerns that have been raised around the implications for the workforce? Earlier this year, the White House put out a study looking at kind of the potential impact on the economy and your workers being displaced, I should say. And for some sectors, there's a lot of projections for AI rendering jobs obsolete. And we've, of course, seen this throughout history. But I'm curious, when we're specifically thinking about kind of the existing people who are out of the workforce and the challenges that they face, what would this mean for those who may face increased competition from technology?
I published a paper late last year or early this year, I can't remember, about sort of going back and reviewing the literature on projections for job loss and skill change. They have been all over the map for 25 years now, and they have swung wildly in terms of pessimism early on to, hey, there are some glimmers of hope here, actually, in terms of employment with what we see, in just broadly speaking, is that those sectors that are most exposed to AI are the one are actually seeing their labor shares grow, right? So, and this has been the pattern across history with automation, is that it creates its own demand. And actually ends up growing the number of jobs that are available. Now, having said that, I do think there is a worrisome case here too, which is in the short and medium term, where we could see a lot of people who have never been exposed to automation before, in the professions particularly, that will find themselves competing against machines. And some of those people are going to be displaced. And so we do have a transition problem that we have to deal with. Failing to deal with that transition problem has, in previous episodes of automation, has created enormous problems for the society. And I think we need better policy in place to address that challenge. which is helping people retool and reskill in the wake of the automation that is coming, and for populations that have never really experienced it.
So I think the metaphors of past industries encountering challenges is very useful to think about, because clearly that we will have changes in roles here. And the question that everybody's asking is, how much will these tools augment people in their roles, and how much will it replace them in these roles? And there's two things that I think about that. One is that you hear a lot from both the gloomy and the overly optimistic side. They basically make the same mistake, both of them do, is that they think intelligence is the primary barrier to work, or the primary fuel to getting work done. And individual intelligence is really important, and it can be a key contributor, but often specialization is even more important, and the ability to communicate with a wide range of people and work together, coordination. And intelligence can help with some of that, especially when you're talking about the language that you need to communicate with others, but it isn't the primary constraint often in our ability to be productive. One thing that's really different here from, say, the factory line automation, where you had an individual who was, screwing bolts onto a car and then got replaced by a robot, is in the spheres where things like LLMs are automating. They're automating tasks around language or coding, things that unlike the factory worker who, when they don't have that job, they can't go out and build a competing factory, right, to put their skills to use. The journalist who's has an article that's being written by an LLM, they can also use that same tool in a way that was not available. So I think the retraining capabilities here are much quicker. The journalist can say, how do I use this tool to do something like what I was doing, but at like 10x, whereas that wasn't possible for the factory workers. So I think, and that's generally speaking, I think these tools offer a lot of opportunities for individuals or smaller scale organizations. They let them punch way above their weight, do things that it used to take a much bigger organization to do, and they can do it at a much smaller scale, even at the individual scale. And I think we'll see that. I think we'll see a lot of smaller size firms, individual firms, that are now creating products, services that hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of people are using and competing, even though they've been displaced maybe from their traditional software engineering job in a bigger company.
I would just add to that, if you look at how this is unfolding, you do see these studies that are pretty much all over the map. So it's hard to say with confidence in terms of just looking at the studies. But if you look at the way AI is deployed, and sure, there'll be some disruptive things about it, but I think, Neil, you're right that it's opening doors to new opportunities for existing people and existing employees. And Friedrich Hayek, he talks about this particular knowledge of time and space or place. And that is something that LLMs can't replace. They can provide more information to somebody who is in that time and is at that place, so they can go out there and do something new and innovative and productive for the economy as a whole. And again, another favorite economist of mine, Julian Simon, humans are the ultimate resource, and they have the ability to adapt. That's what we're fundamentally good at, is taking our skills into a new sector and a new area. But there will be some disruptions, particularly in the short run. But I think it opens far more doors than it closes in terms of adopting AI as a technology for society.
Thank you. We've got 26 minutes left, and I want to save time for questions. But I'm going to ask a 3-part question for our panelists before moving it to you guys. Please be thinking of your questions. But we're having this conference during a unique time in Washington. We're undergoing a presidential transition. If you have thoughts about the performance of the Biden administration, what they've got right, what they've gotten wrong, and also what you'd recommend to the next administration coming in with President-elect Trump. I'd love to hear that. And with a addition to that, we have some state lawmakers at the conference and in the room. Any thoughts on what states should not be doing in the AI space? Take any whack at that.
So I'm happy to take the first whack at that. So the Biden administration's focus on AI was largely, it was in the vein of a lot of the academic work around the impact of technology on society overall. And it took a sort of, what are the risks here first focus, right? And so a somewhat pessimistic view of, well, we need to make sure that we don't harm people from this technology. And a lot of that was framed around things like bias, algorithmic bias, privacy types of harms. There was some national security stuff in there, but a lot of it was around algorithmic bias and those types of that emphasis. And I think the question to always ask with any examination of algorithmic bias is, compared to what? And often that question doesn't get asked. What is the advantage of having a dispassionate credit score rather than your local racist banker decide whether or not you get a loan? And that was something that credit scoring helped solve in the past, where you had to have a personal connection to get a loan. And now people could assess the risk through a credit score. That is a form of algorithmic analysis. It's something that we've been doing for a really long time. And actually, if you go back and you look at the Fair Credit Reporting Act legislative history, it reads exactly like AI regulation legislative history now. The concerns are basically the same. There's big computers somewhere else making decisions that are really important to my life. We got to make sure those are done well and fair. And Congress, worked out a bill that tried to do that, and in some ways helped, but in some ways consolidated the industry and created some other problems. But all this is to say that emphasis on risk, I think it could be balanced very much, and I hope the new administration does, with a vision of how we can succeed in this space. The U.S. has the top companies in the world on this. We have amazing potential here, amazing talent, and hopefully we will continue to fuel that. And so that would be my first call for the new administration to balance that risk approach with more of a positive vision, a benefit, a direction for the U.S. Rather than a reactive executive order, for example. At the state level, there are 700 plus active pieces of legislation on AI right now. I would say that states should step back and ask a couple of questions about the legislation that comes before them. The first question I always suggest is that, did a version of this bill exist before ChatGPT existed, before it really entered the consciousness? If so, it might not really be about AI. It might be about something else. That happened a lot. There's a lot of bills out there that are basically repitched previous legislation around whatever issue that somebody cared about, housing, taxes, something like that. So the second thing I would say is that a focus on it very expressly on what harm you're trying to resolve. A lot of the AI bills are sort of big picture, like, hey, let's regulate the companies, but without like a lot of focus on what particular problem we're trying to fix. And so I would drill down. Almost always, if you drill down, you'll be able to find that, there are some laws in this space already. Let's figure out whether or not AI brings something new. And if it does, let's try to tackle that specific new thing, rather than trying to address it at a very abstract level about AI. I have a lot more ideas. I'd be glad to talk to you about them. Have a one-pager that gives a bunch of stuff that states can do well on this. But I want to hear your guys' questions. And also, I want to hear what my co-panelists have to say.
So I'm going to steal shamelessly from my AEI colleague, Yuval Levine, who talks about this by saying, we don't really in this country do precautionary regulation. We have our apparatus is set up to respond to actual harms, and there's tons of law and regulation already in place on many issues that could be adapted or applied And my view of it is, I would actually like to make sure that we have identified the clear harm that we're seeking to remediate, rather than, as you were saying, and trying to anticipate all the things that could go wrong and regulate toward that. That's a nightmare. With respect to the vagueness of the legislation, I think that is, especially in post-Chevron land, I just don't see how that's going to work. We can't just sort of say, okay, agencies go take care of this. That's not a viable approach. And so I think the real precaution we need to be taking is not to try to anticipate and overregulate ahead of time.
Thanks. I would agree 100% with both of what you just said. And I think when you look at the future of AI and how we should regulate it, there's almost a pretense of knowledge to think that we know where it's going and we know what regulations are good right now. It's very early in the process, and as you say, we need to identify very real harm. So the way I would look at it is, like you look at any regulation, you have to first identify a market failure or a problem that needs fixing. Then you should demonstrate that whatever you're proposing is actually going to provide more benefits than costs. And if you get to that stage, at that point you have to pick the least cost way of addressing the problem you want. But I think ultimately what we're looking for and striving for, if you want to be successful in AI, is having a sort of a user sovereignty instead of a mother may I world. And I think the Biden administration was a little bit too concerned with the mother may I. We're going to put guardrails on everything. Nobody's going to get hurt. We're going to keep everything in the right lanes, and that really is a drag on the ability of AI to flourish in the economy. And so beyond AI itself, I think in a new administration, I think we have to look at things like energy policy. Do we have the energy available for the data centers that AI requires? That's an important thing. Maybe looking at access to broadband. Is that, we still have flaws in our deployment of broadband. Those are going to be important things the more and more that our lives are being sort of connected to the internet. So those are important policies beyond the space of AI itself, that are important policies that have to be get those right before we move on. And so there's a number of other sort of adjacent policies that we have to think about as well. So I'll leave it there so we can get to the question.
Can I just jump in with one more thing? I think one thing the Biden executive order and some of this emphasis on rights does get right is that vis-a-vis the government and government uses of this technology, there are real concerns. And I think we should say that those are real concerns, especially for people in lower economic tiers or people who are more impacted by the criminal justice system. And so I do think that there are some things that the government should be looking at when the Congress should be looking at, that state legislators should be looking at when we think about how government adopts these technologies. How does that intersect with Fourth Amendment rights, for example, or privacy rights vis-a-vis other privacy rights vis-a-vis the government? I think there are a lot of interesting, concerning issues there that we should focus on.
I want to introduce my colleague Grant Deaver for FREOPP's energy scholar.
Yeah, Grant Dever. Hey everyone, thanks for this. I'm wondering on the energy point. I mean, it's been interesting from my vantage point. It seems like a lot of the NGO and environmental groups have kind of changed their tune on some of these things. One may speculate why. Apparently, all the poverty, all these concerns due to energy scarcity weren't compelling, but now we have to fuel the AI, so we need regulatory change. What are your guys' thoughts on the potential for regulatory change, and maybe how any of those, what positive externalities maybe come from that help the bottom half of Americans as well?
So really quick, the intersection between AI and energy, I think there's a sort of narrow lane to walk on this, because if you say that it demands so much energy, people get really worried that it's going to drive up their energy prices. My understanding of the stats right now is that returning to our pre-1970s arc of about 3 to 4% increase in energy supply would be totally sufficient here, and actually would have a lot of the knock-on effects that you talk about. My other thought around building energy capacity is that there are some parallels here. I think we are at, we can't know what the future is, but there is some risk that we're in the build out fiber all across the country phase that the internet went through, where people spent so much money, a bunch of companies went bankrupt, and then the demand didn't really appear until a little bit later. But the capacity was there. And so if we have an AI bubble and it drives a bunch of energy creation, and then it pops, and the result is we have abundant energy, like that would be a pretty good outcome. So I'm hopeful for that, and so I think that's one possible outcome.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, and this idea that it could ever be a bad thing to oversupply on energy when we know that we're so in need of it. It's like, just do it, and you can see it happening with, the reopening of nuclear plants, and all sorts of good and interesting things are happening out there. And it's ultimately, if there is an oversupply, somebody's going to figure out how to use it in a really creative and productive way.
I would just add to that, what's happening, I think it's highlighting some problems with our current energy system and the public utility commissions. When it takes 15 to 20 years to site a new plant, those are problems with or without AI. And I think just the rush of AI has opened up a lot of sore spots that have been there for a long time. And I think if it helps focus energy on getting those fixed, it's going to be good, because we'll have energy for other things as well. So.
Hi, thanks. I'll stipulate, based on what you've all said, that it does produce equal opportunity, which answers the question from the panel. But I wonder how that equal opportunity will translate into equality, and that gets into the issue that you've also raised about the difference between intelligence as well as the technology and motivation. So I'm back to being a teacher these days, and we'll assign a 10-page paper, and this is similar to an example, and that normally would take people 20 hours to do. Now, I can tell pretty much that if somebody spent 20, then they've been taught and allowed to use AI, by the way, both Consensus and Claude, ChatGPT, other things. So I can pretty much tell now that somebody who, using the AI tools, fully trained, spends the same 20 hours, that paper is amazing. That's an amazing product. On the other hand, somebody can produce a 10-page paper in 2 hours, and it's not that great. It's not terrible, but at the same time, I worry that they've been demotivated, right? And I can see this playing out over and over for the future, in which people aren't building that human capital and that motivation, whereas other people are leaning into it. They haven't lost the motivation. They haven't lost that. And that then they're truly being augmented. So if that's the case, if that pattern continues, some people will, the variation will continue to spread out further and further, even though, in a sense, opportunity is equal. Thanks.
So it's a very important, obviously, point, Charles. And I think we see this, again, it's one of these emerging things that you kind of see in the literature around this, which and in actual practice in the economy, which is that the people who take the shortcut are the ones who then wind up getting automated out of a job, because it's the front end, back end thing. Like with coders, it's the people who do the front end work, which is easier than the data science and other full stack operations that are going on in the background. Those people are having a hard time finding a job. If you're just content with doing the front page of the web page, and not understanding the deeper principles and activities behind that, you're probably more at risk of having to go find another job. But if if you are the person who uses it to augment their skills and to take their skill level up to the next level, the opportunities are absolutely amazing, I think, in the workforce. And that motivation question is one of the things that I think that AI can help with in terms of the education and coaching aspects of what generative AI can do with people, is to help them to see the potential, that individuals to see the potential that they have and to work toward it. Obviously, human beings are on a bell curve of all kind, motivation, and some people are not easily motivated, but I think it provides some opportunities to help people move further along in that domain as well.
And I would just add that study you had talked about earlier, skilled people are probably going to benefit more because this is just generating ideas. And then if you're at the top of your field, you know which ideas are the ones that are going to be the lucrative ones. So you're going to see some sorting there where you'll have, but again, that can happen anywhere in the income sort of spectrum. So even lower income individuals will have opportunities if they have the motivation and if they have the skills. They will be able to choose what AI is throwing at them and picking the good things out of what they're dealing with. But it's going to be very important I think there will be some changes due to the way people use AI, but having AI as a tool that can help you, even if you're, say, less motivated, if you know that you can get something done with AI that improves where you are today, you'll use it. And so even the less motivated, I think, benefit. But like you say, people are across the spectrum, and people who have the insights and abilities to get things done are going to probably rise to the surface a little bit more.
I just add that I think that the interesting thing here is how, I hear this a lot. Actually, I was just in Fargo's lecturing, and I had a teacher who raised the same concern. And what I encouraged him to say was like, what does your students' use of this technology say about the future job market? And to your point, how often do we have to write an amazing 10-page paper? There are some people who that's their entire job. There are some people who they don't have to do it very often, but it would be better if it improves a little bit, right? Or if it improves. And so what you're saying is like the distribution is shifting this way towards more quality, and that we need to push our students to say like, hey, like in the stuff that's important to me and that's important to my future, like how do I learn how to maximize it? How do I get myself in this distribution? I think there are a lot of people who take shortcuts. There always have been students who take shortcuts who think like, what? I'm never going to use this stuff in the future. And we should push them to be ambitious about what they're doing, but also take it as a signal. What does that shortcut say about what is likely to be the tasks that will differentiate them in the marketplace in the future?
I just wanted to add one thing. Last night, I started a Google course on Coursera on how to write prompts. And I've been using AI a lot in my work, but getting some instruction on how to write prompts, it's quite difficult work to write a good prompt. And it is, in a way, quite motivating because you're like, oh, I can get so much more out of this platform if I just give it another 30 seconds worth of thought before I ask the question. So again, that's a motivation question in itself. People have to want to learn that kind of thing. But I think the opportunities are pretty limitless.
I think maybe another more abstract way to frame the question that was just asked is, how will generative AI impact the entire intelligence distribution? Will it fundamentally change the distribution? Will it bifurcate it? Will people at the very low ends be marginally less impacted than the people at the very high end? Or will it potentially shift the entire distribution to the right? And I think that, how will that also impact like socioeconomic mobility, but first, how are you guys thinking about generative AI impacting the broader just distribution of how people solve problems?
Well, Logan is my colleague at Abundance Institute, so a little bit of a ringer in the crowd here. Great question. People sort of jokingly say that once this stuff is on your phone, it'll be like carrying an extra 10 points of IQ in your pocket. I would just shift back to my earlier. So I think it's more of a shift up of everybody, but I would just caution that has really uneven effects. That won't necessarily make, shift incomes by 10%, right? Or productivity by 10%. It really depends on the type of job that people are doing and how they use the device and how they use those 10 points of extra IQ. And it also really depends on how important intelligence or just raw horsepower is to human flourishing. And I think it's, like I said, it's important, but our society as a whole is wildly more capable and intelligent than any one of us. And so upskilling, 10% points on the individuals probably adds more horsepower to the, overall society, but it's hard to know exactly how that's going to squeeze out.
Yeah. If generative AI and other forms of AI have this effect of moving the distribution to the right, I think that, again, it kind of feeds back into the overall productivity of the economy. It's going to then generate more wealth, more income, higher wages as it goes. Now, some people are going to benefit more than others in every one of those domains, right? And I'm okay with that. As long as everybody is moving up, I think that that's the key question. And I do think that having that external brain with you, helping you to untangle questions and problems as you go, can only be a benefit, especially for the lesser skilled, right? Less education, less skill. For instance, we all here in this room place a lot of emphasis on intellectual work and, writing and being a good writer. And it's like, it's a guild activity in many ways in DC. And if everybody moves up the writing spectrum, that is leveling the playing field quite a bit for people who 5 years ago just wouldn't be considered for one of these jobs that we value so highly in the city.
Yeah, I would just add, I do also think it's going to push the distribution to the right, because basically there two things are happening. We have access to more information, and the price of that information is dropping substantially, and both of those are always a win for overall productivity and overall growth. And even anywhere in the income spectrum, people are ingenious. So even if you're not aiming to be a CEO of a company, if you have a new tool that's going to get your job done quicker, you'll find a way to do it. And there's that information, even if you didn't design it, that disperses throughout the economy as well. And people are pretty good, quite frankly, about finding ways to get their own jobs done better, even if that's just a small little job, not running a Fortune 500 company.
We got two minutes for two quick questions here. Yeah, take both of them at the same time.
I'm curious if AI is, I know we think about growth and opportunity, but if AI can be just viewed as a quality of life increaser. So rather than look at AI as a competing, taking my job kind of thing, there is any policy or thought about regulating the amount of job displacement due to AI and rather give time back to the workers instead of replacing them? Because I think like in true capitalism, the innovation should lead to better quality of life rather than displacing workers, saying you get the same pay, the production of our company is the same, now we have AI. I think like seeing policy to help encourage companies to do that would be nice rather than people feeling at risk of their jobs. It's actually raising quality of life all around. I don't know if that's always thought about.
And the question I have has to do with how organizations implement AI and sort of the pace at which they should do it, because taking, for example, what you're saying in terms of the effect that AI can have in medical care or with insurance companies in processing claims quicker. There was UHC got into some hot water on this with skilled nursing care, in that they were using AI and it denied care to some people that should have continued to receive care. And so how do we, implement that in a smart way?
You got 30 seconds.
Very quickly, I think there is going to be a clash of institutions and organizational behavior as they adopt this new technology. But I think in the long run, those kinds of problems get worked out. But it is going to be a struggle institutionally for a lot of companies to adapt.
Not a lot to add. Trust the market. These businesses are going to make decisions that they think are in their best interests, and they're much better able to make those decisions than we are to advise them.
It's always important to ask compared to what. The big difference between an AI and a doctor is you can test an AI in an environment over and over and over and see what outcomes come out. And that's really hard to do in a detached way with a doctor or a nurse. And so getting there is really important. And I would love to talk to you more about yours after.